Story 1. I feel Zelensky's pain deeply, especially because Africans, due to colonialism, have faced similar challenges as Ukraine. Yet, we are pressured to concede resources as if we invited this situation simply because we lack advanced technology. Interestingly, some Africans believe that Russia has their best interests at heart because of its anti-colonial rhetoric in various countries, particularly in former French-speaking nations. If you look at the United Nations resolution votes, you will notice that many of these nations sided with Russia. I feel Europe's arrogance has blinded them to this shift in allegiances, a form of arrogance that I, as an African, am all too familiar with and have suffered from. However, that does not mean I wish for Europe to fail. The principle behind Ukraine's sovereignty is what I care about, even if it means supporting countries that colonized us. We will address historical injustices when the time comes, but two wrongs do not make a right, and the enemy of our enemy is not our friend. I hope Europe overcomes its aggressors. Story 2. It's really hard to describe. Watching this all happen in real time was surreal to say the least, and I'm a Swede living in Sweden. I'm not alone in having grown up with a favorable view of the United States, sort of idolizing them in a weird way, but all of that mostly vanished tonight. Whatever views I had of the great United States growing up just broke, as if watching this betrayed the naive trust one misguidedly put in the country all these years. The feeling of safety knowing that you had the colossal and once heroic nation that is, or was, the United States on your team felt like a never-meet-your-hero moment. Just sheer and raw disappointment. I'm an insignificant nobody in all of this, and my opinion doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but I thought I'd take a crack at it since you asked and I felt like venting. Cheers. Edit. I am not in the proper state of mind to respond to all the replies right now, but for what it is worth, most Europeans understand what is happening in the United States, and we are not going to collectively judge all of you for the outcome. We know how you elect your representatives in a first-past-the-post system. We know who is for and who is against. If you voted against Donald Trump and you are informed, then in our eyes you are cleared. You said enough, and that acts as the safeguard we all relied on you to have. If you voted for him and relish what he has done so far, then I am sorry to say you have either been misled by propaganda, you are a useful idiot, or you are straight up a bad person according to the very values you are supposedly prepared to die for. Neither Democrats nor Republicans of old would have stood for this if it were not for outside interference. Ronald Reagan would not, Richard Nixon would not, and if you held the values of the Republicans we once knew, you would not either. Stay stellar, my friends. I'm obviously not representing anyone but myself, but this is the gist of it as far as I'm aware in terms of how Europeans feel. The world is a strange place right now, but the comments have me feeling optimistic, so thank you for that. Story 3. It is ironic that Vance demanded a live thank you from Zelensky when Republicans have attempted to block all aid to Ukraine for the past 3 years. Story 4. It's surprising how often I have heard the argument that a woman president would govern with her emotions. Meanwhile, watching Donnie act so immaturely is quite astonishing. Story 5. I believe this performance aimed to justify reducing support for Ukraine. It did not go well because Trump and Vance appeared ridiculous to anyone who isn't fully influenced by a cult-like mentality, while Zelensky maintained his composure and came across as very competent. Story 6. As a non-American, this reinforces everything I have known about this individual since 2015. I am truly disappointed and heartbroken by Americans in general. He is not worth listing all the flaws, yet you voted for him twice. In response to this situation, I donated money to Ukraine right after I learned about it. Story 7. As a European, it felt like the first part of an ugly breakup. We need to understand that the United States is not our ally anymore. I hope you will not fall completely into Putin's hands, but it currently looks like a significant win for him. It is very sad. Story 8. We witnessed a turning point in history. It is a sad day for everyone in the world. There are higher powers influencing events and pushing the world into chaos. Nothing good will come of this for millions of innocent people. Story 9. Trump stated that it would make good television, not realizing that the world views him as the stupid, ignorant bully of the show. Even the optics of needing his little sidekick were telling. Story 10. The draft dodger and the submarine door gunner are lecturing the wartime leader about the realities of war. It is a situation normal, all fouled up as usual. Story 11. I believe it is time to call them what they are, enemies of the free world. More importantly, it is time to act accordingly. Story 12. Shameful. A man who avoided military service in America is bullying someone who is 10 times the person he is. Greetings from the Netherlands. I will not return to America after this incident. I know there are decent people in America, but this is who you elected to represent your country. Story 13. Watching two privileged individuals try to extort a man whose sovereign country has been invaded by an irrational dictator was absolutely galling. It's chilling too. I think the world will turn away from America after this. Story 14. The entire world finally saw firsthand how petty Trump and Vance are. It is seriously reminiscent of behavior from 12-year-olds. Story 15. Embarrassing. The person is literally fighting for the survival of his country, and they are lecturing him for not showing enough support. What a bunch of petty nonsense. I am glad we elected this unqualified administration. The best thing that could happen now is for Europe to unite in the absence of any useful support from the United States, as long as the former president insists on conducting his business while being subservient to another leader. Edit. I just realized that this thread specified opinions from non-Americans. I'm going to leave this up because this is truly how I feel, but full disclosure, I am an American living in the South. In the future, I will make an effort to pay closer attention to the post title. Story 16. What do I think? We need to prepare for a conflict because the United States has an unpredictable president. If you believe this will end in 4 years, you are being naive. Story 17. I didn't think my opinion of Vance could get any lower, but here we are. Whatever respect I had left for the United States is in the gutter after they elected that individual. It's a nation facing significant issues due to the actions of some citizens. Story 18. It's perhaps the most embarrassing thing I have ever seen a president do. Clinton faced scandal in the Oval Office, and the world has suffered greatly under Trump. Story 19. This Canadian felt we witnessed history today, and not in a good way. It was public shaming, a shakedown, and a display of cowardice. As Canadians, we are angry with our southern neighbors. This display of a strong man against an ally is solidifying our rage. Story 20. Most Australians already feel like America is a circus run by clowns, and I don't think the Trump presidency sequel is doing much to help the counterargument. Story 21. I feel like Volodymyr is a better man than I am because I would have picked the nearest chair and thrown it at that person's forehead. Story 22. If you have been educated to detect dictatorships in general, you will have noticed the very specific tactics being used. Ask questions that make it seem like Zelensky is losing the war, such as inquiring about sending men to the front, while not allowing him to reply. Use specific words like dictate repeatedly to imply that Zelensky is the dictator. Make him feel small in front of the American people to elevate their own stature. These are typical and classic propaganda tactics. Aside from that, they appear foolish. Low-intelligence individuals who are literally blackmailing and belittling him on live television. They are far less than the man he is. They are bullies who perceive themselves as powerful but are actually insignificant, and history will remember them as traitors. I only regret that we can no longer have a formal condemnation of their actions, because that is what Trump deserves. Story 23. They thought they were going to get a cowardly politician begging for help, but they got someone strong instead. Story 24. America is gone. You have destroyed yourself. The question is, how much more will fall? The world has become far more dangerous tonight. Every dictator was watching that, realizing that from now on they can do whatever they want. No one will care. Story 25. The man is a pedophilic criminal. He and his supporters can face severe consequences for their actions. Story 26. Knowing Ukraine is in a difficult situation, there are efforts to exploit the country for its mineral resources. This reflects the current stance of the United States. Story 27. I was discussing this with my stepmother here in Australia. We both believe that Trump and Vance are complete lunatics. As a scientist, I empathized with Zelensky when he was lectured about the state of his country by someone who has little knowledge of the situation, similar to how anti-vaxxers misunderstand my field. One valid point she raised is how Trump suggested an impending World War III. He seems aware of the situation and may be trying to shift the blame onto someone else, despite the risks not being as high before his re-election. That is quite concerning. This has reinforced our lack of faith in the United States and our hope that the rest of the free world will unite so we no longer need the US. While the US might be one of the most powerful countries globally, the rest of us are much stronger, and it appears we may have to demonstrate this in the future. Story 28. As a Canadian, I want to express my strong disapproval of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and their supporters. It is time for Americans to recognize the situation and take action to change the current regime as soon as possible, regardless of the challenges. I am exhausted by the ongoing threats and intimidation. Story 29. Every American is expressing shame instead of organizing. Organize and resist. The best time was before the elections, and now it might be too late, but it is still the second best time to rebel. Take action. Stop being passive. Story 30. Nothing like a wealthy individual and a person with no foreign policy experience lecturing a wartime president. Truly inspiring. Story 31. It is not surprising, given American history, that Trump is the president. America is a country built on greed and selfishness. The problem is that America is now under the influence of Putin, and it is evident with some of the most graceless individuals behaving inappropriately in the presence of a wartime leader. Story 32. Just incredibly cringeworthy. Wartime negotiations as reality television. Only in America. Trump will not criticize Putin because he needs Putin's signature on a deal. But calling Zelensky a dictator and saying he is doing a terrible job is acceptable? Does Trump understand that Zelensky needs to sign the deal as well? Story 33. Embarrassed, disgusted, and repulsed. Zelensky is a treasure while our leaders seem oblivious. They cannot accept that Zelensky prioritizes the well-being of his country over personal gain. They struggle to comprehend that perspective. Shortly after that meeting, I read that Hegseth instructed the FBI to back off on Russian planning. In other words, only favors for Russia. This timeline is unacceptable. Story 34. Made it even clearer than it already was. America cannot be trusted. Sooner or later, they will betray you or extort you. Story 35. I did not expect anything, and I was still disappointed. I expected Trump and Vance to lie as usual but not to bully Zelensky. Story 36. The worst performance from an American president I have ever seen. He is incompetent. It is hard to believe the majority of Americans voted for him. Story 37. Honestly, if I were American, I would be so humiliated right now. Even the secondhand embarrassment is almost too much to bear. I do not understand how he was elected twice. I do not understand how all the things that are happening are happening. It is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. And for them to be outclassed by a man they sought to humble and humiliate, it is delicious schadenfreude. But it is also awful because it is real. They are so inept, but they are still doing these things. They want to decimate Ukraine so they can gift it to Russia. Russian media was live-streaming the event. How is this not treason? How is this being allowed to continue? Why are the Republicans so complacent? I am genuinely at a loss. Story 38. I am personally becoming convinced that we actually live in a simulation. As we get closer to creating our own using artificial intelligence, it seems the original creators decided to play around with this universe just for amusement. It feels more real than what is happening right now. Story 39. Obviously an American, but it needs to be said. If Congress remains ineffective, it may be time to seriously consider state seating. I have never felt angrier or more embarrassed to be an American in my life after watching that. Trump and Vance were unprofessional and unfunny. They acted like schoolyard bullies who never grew up. Zelensky was a champion who honestly would have been justified in acting angrier than he did. He was the only adult in that room with two childish individuals who needed to be reprimanded, along with a group of biased reporters lacking integrity. Story 40. I thought it was childish, unstatesmanlike, and disgusting behavior. You would not treat a guest in your home like that. Have some dignity and argue in private. Story 41. Two weak men are yelling at a strong man who is doing his best to make a nuanced point in an unfamiliar language. It is mind-boggling how anyone could possibly think that Trump and Vance came across well in this situation. Story 42. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons with assurances that the world would protect it. Most people do not realize this. Now, Ukraine is barely holding on with limited military support, while our president aims to freeze current borders, leaving Ukraine vulnerable to losing a significant amount of territory. I am an older man now, but I do not see how this ends well. Story 43. It is the end of Pax Americana. History will view this decade as the decline of the American empire and the beginning of another age of chaos and insecurity until another nation rises to enforce stability and achieve global dominance. From the broader perspective of human history, this was inevitable. It is unfortunate that we are living through it. Story 44. I think America is now the laughingstock of the world. A compulsive liar who is only interested in lining his and his friends' pockets, no matter the cost to others. Story 45. What a pair of fools they are. Not only did Zelensky humiliate them, but they also did a great job of humiliating the United States on the world stage. There is no class at all. Story 46. It feels like this was always the plan since the last call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Trump makes a terrible and unacceptable offer, such as giving Russia everything they want. When Ukraine doesn't accept it or act grateful enough, the United States walks away, dusting their hands. This leaves Putin unfettered, and Trump can blame Ukraine, saying, "We offered them a beautiful deal, but they didn't want it, so it's not our problem." Story 47. I am Australian. I have learned that the United States cannot be trusted or depended on anymore. They have a delusional, narcissistic bully in charge. Story 48. You all have made serious mistakes with these two. I know the individuals reading this are the ones most affected, but honestly, this is the most painful experience I have ever had. If there were a department or agency not staffed by someone inexperienced tasked with investigating the rumors about Trump being a Russian asset, perhaps things would be different. I go to sleep thinking I could never be so appalled by a human being, only to wake up and discover I can reach new levels of disappointment. Story 49. Absolutely atrocious and exactly what Putin wants to see. This conduct towards Zelensky by these two individuals is utterly disgraceful. Story 50. I am Australian. We have our own political problems and an upcoming election, but those issues are minor compared to what America is facing. I wonder when all these Second Amendment supporting Republican voters will realize that Donald Trump is exactly the kind of situation that the amendment was created for. Story 51. Do you have kids? I have kids, and sometimes they have to do things they don't like or they get in trouble for something. When that happens, they will end up yelling at me about how I am rude and mean for asking them to be nice or to listen to repair the damage they have caused to their sibling or others. Because they are children, I sometimes have to walk them through the whole process and accept that they may not be happy with the resolution, but they still have to apologize and be helpful in the future. So, what was your question? Oh yeah, when the president and vice president sound like actual children, it makes me mad and sad. Zelensky may not be perfect and Putin is certainly problematic, but for Trump to yell at Zelensky for not saying thank you, which he mentioned multiple times during that rant, is beyond ridiculous. Zelensky has been fighting a war with Russia to keep his country free from the very people who oppressed them only 40 years ago, while also justifying to the world why they should help him fight against such a powerful oppressor like Putin. It is sick and ridiculous, and those who continue to defend this man and his damaging policies are a joke. You cannot say that if Biden had done that, you would think it is okay. What about Obama? What about Bush? You can't defend that, and if you do, you are not a patriot. You are a lapdog to a dictator. The president is not just one person. They are a position that represents the entire country, and that was an embarrassment beyond anything he has done previously. The face of the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States during that meeting perfectly encapsulated how everyone who watched that display should feel: utter shame at what our country has become. Everything else aside, that is proof he is not fit to represent our country and should not be allowed to serve as the leader of the free world because he sounds like a child upset that his friend won't thank him for letting him play with his toys while his friend is getting punished for wanting to play in the first place. Story 52. What kind of diplomacy was that? It was juvenile. At least it should have been behind closed doors, no cameras if you're going to bully someone like that. It lacked professionalism and decorum, and they are the leaders of the United States. Story 53. Trump and Vance performed as well as expected in a complex political environment requiring tact and statesmanship. They are absolute fools. Story 54. You can clearly see that they invited him just to make fun of him. They clearly showed that they are not friendly with Europe anymore. They acted like bully kids in schools who believed they were the cool ones by making fun of the weak. Disgusting. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance should be held accountable for their actions. Shame on the American justice system as well. How can someone have the right to be president if that person has committed crimes and appeared in front of judges? Shame on everyone who voted for him. I know the majority do not care. They will be proud of that decision today. Because of greedy billionaires, Americans have forgotten what makes us human. Story 55. I am a third-generation Ukrainian immigrant living in Canada. I am absolutely furious and disgusted at how disrespectful that was. Story 56. It was one of the most disappointing and saddening things I have ever seen. Those two individuals can only dream of being a fraction of the person Zelensky is, and they are aware of it. Story 57. This is not the America the world supports in times of crisis. They are the crisis the world will band together to fight against. I hope most ordinary Americans have watched this and hung their heads, thinking, oh my, we are in trouble. Story 58. I am truly disgusted by what I watched earlier. It is nauseating and abhorrent. Before these officials took office, I often felt inclined to defend the United States and its people whenever they faced criticism in Latin America. However, I can no longer respect them. My disdain for their actions grows each day as they continue to put the world through this turmoil once again. I genuinely hope for the day when the world can move away from the influence of the United States and they no longer have a say in global affairs. Story 59. Both individuals are problematic. On a serious note, they are dangerous. Europe can no longer rely on the United States. Furthermore, I have no sympathy for the American people. They voted for Donald Trump twice. You get what you vote for. Story 60. I am filled with rage. I hope that Trump, Vance, and Musk face the consequences of their actions. I read a comment suggesting that even Putin would have treated Zelensky with more respect, and that may very well be true. Zelensky is a true leader while Trump is a parasite. Story 61. Appalled. What is going on? Who are those individuals? It was like witnessing fourth-grade bullies ganging up on a victim. Zelensky hasn't had a decent night's sleep in over 3 years. They brought him halfway across the globe to ridicule his attire, won't let him speak, and continuously interrupt each other and him. Who is running the United States? Get your act together. Story 62. For years, people have pondered how ordinary Germans felt about the rise of the Nazi regime and speculated on what they would have done in that situation. Now, we are witnessing exactly what they would have done. Nothing. They sit in silent complicity because, at this point, they are not personally affected. When they begin to feel the pressure of the metaphorical constrictor around their ribs, it will be too late. Story 63. America appears to be growing weaker each day. Trump, his supporter Vance, and his entire cabinet are unqualified individuals. Story 64. It was arrogant and ridiculous. It made America look weak and foolish in the eyes of the world. Trump and Vance are just that weak, foolish, and, I would add, unwise. Story 65. Exactly what I would expect to see from a pair of Russian puppets. If I were an American, I would feel ashamed. Story 66. Trump and Vance are Russian agents. You would think this revelation would be a bigger deal, but Americans are too preoccupied with winning. Story 67. Like everything Trump and Vance do, it was an embarrassment. Trump cannot get out of bed in the morning without embarrassing me as an American. Story 68. You chose this group of American people. You are now a laughingstock. It was disgusting what was said and done. The world is watching. Trump might get his wish for World War III. Story 69. Today's Oval Office meeting was a diplomatic disaster. President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance criticized Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, accusing him of being ungrateful and disrespectful. Trump even warned Zelensky he was risking World War III. The planned signing of a critical minerals deal was abruptly cancelled, leaving Ukraine in a precarious position. This public spectacle undermines U.S. diplomatic efforts and plays into Putin's hands. Trump's and Vance's behavior today is a disgrace. Story 70. The United States is quickly approaching its moment of truth, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't terrified. With very few exceptions, Republicans have been in lockstep with what Donald Trump has done. It feels like the Twilight Zone. It also feels like it is happening to someone else. It seems that nothing has changed in the town I live in. Gas and grocery prices have remained the same. If it weren't for the news and being directly affected as a federal employee, it wouldn't even be a noticeable shift. But that is the problem, isn't it? Nobody cares until it starts to directly impact them, and by then, it might be too late. I am disappointed in my fellow Americans, disgusted at who is leading us, and the United States can no longer be trusted. It is clear that we have been compromised by foreign influences, at the very least by a billionaire who makes false claims. I keep trying to stay focused on the things that matter, but that is so hard when the worst this country has to offer is currently in control. A part of me believes that this needed to happen. We've become complacent, lazy, selfish, greedy, and have overall lacked compassion. We desperately needed a wake-up call. I hope that is what this is, and I pray that is what this is. I don't know what I am going to do if this is what the long-term future holds. Story 71. It was the most shameful thing I have ever seen. Zelensky agreed to the deal that Trump requested. Yet when he arrived, he was bombarded with Russian propaganda and belittled. The United States showed the entire world that it no longer deals in good faith and cannot be trusted to support its allies. Story 72. Zelensky is a hero and will be remembered as such. Donald Trump isn't fit to lace Zelensky's boots, and history will remember him that way as well. Story 73. It's strange that some Americans are saying Zelensky had the wrong attitude in the White House. It's strange because I saw the exact opposite. I was just watching Fox News commentators explaining how badly he behaved, showing moments where he supposedly interrupted the president, when in fact it was the exact opposite. Trump wasn't letting Zelensky finish a sentence. How can there be such different interpretations of what was going on? In Europe, we've seen the Ukrainian ambassador's gesture as signaling she was embarrassed by Trump's attitude. On Fox News, they were saying it was because of Zelensky's poor attitude. Again, two very opposite interpretations. Strange, to say the least. Story 74. One for the history books. I have never seen a head of state treated this way. Trump is a bully and a dictator. Story 75. Zelensky has proven many times that he is a world leader. Trump and Vance are fraudulent individuals who should face punishment. Story 76. I cannot, in good conscience, concede that there was anything appropriate about this treatment of Zelensky. Kissing Putin's ring is the most despicable thing Trump has done, aside from the other violations of human decency. It is bizarre that people kiss his ring. Story 77. I don't know how Zelensky didn't stand up and confront that individual when Trump pushed him. Zelensky is a better man than I. Story 78. I am British. I moved to America before the election. I knew it would be bad. I did not expect it to be a quick descent into authoritarianism. The interview today was truly the final blow for America as a democratic superpower. It perfectly crystallized what the Make America Great Again movement is: belligerent, ignorant, arrogant. It has long been said that when fascism arrives in America, it will be wrapped in a Bible and a flag. It is here now. Simultaneously, the most and least surprising thing has been the reaction from conservatives. His base, short-sighted as they are, loves this. However, even the conservatives seem to be bending over backwards to justify it. as if they are too afraid to admit their mistake. People are unironically claiming that the way Zelensky was treated is justified by his outfit. Story 79. I believe that after this incident, Europeans should really consider arming themselves with nuclear weapons. The same goes for Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. This suggests that World War III is closer than ever. Story 80. From Australia here. I have only seen a clip of it where Zelensky was saying something about how the United States isn't feeling influence yet, but will. Trump appeared to take offense at this, and not allowing Zelensky to finish devolved the conversation into an analogy of a card game, making accusations about World War III. Vance then proceeded to make arguments about Ukraine's situation and problems, which are all based on hearsay rather than actual evidence. If these were my leaders, I would be ashamed of their conduct. Trump and Vance. I don't think anything negative about Zelensky and don't know much about him, but I am impressed that he speaks English as well as he does, considering it is a second or third language. That's not to say I'm not ashamed by Albanese or Dutton, our prime minister and federal opposition leader currently, because frankly, I am, but for different reasons. After having seen a little more, something of note. After Trump and Vance stated Zelensky should be thankful to the United States and he should, Zelensky appears to try to defuse the situation by saying, I said thank you here and I am thankful to the American people or something to that effect, while Trump and Vance continued to speak over him and double down on their rhetoric. Story 81. I think Vance should keep quiet and speak only when addressed, as he seems to believe he is tough, and what he is saying is foolish and provoking. Story 82. I genuinely cannot comprehend how Trump and Vance can get away with being such terrible people. Why are they not being held to the same standard as everyone else? What is wrong with the United States? Also, Trump, I strongly disapprove of your attempts regarding Canada. I hope Trump faces consequences for his actions. Story 83. Vance and Trump are weak and putting the United States in a vulnerable position. They are acting like puppets for Russia. I do not understand why the American public is not standing up and demonstrating against this situation. Anyone defending Trump and his associates is disappointing. Story 84. I loved when Zelensky said, "You've been to Ukraine once. How do you know what's happening there and how the people feel?" Vance responded, I've seen and heard things on TV. Trump makes similar statements when asked or corrected about something, saying, I've seen it on TV and online. I've heard about it. It's frustrating to see genuine ignorance displayed by those working for the Kremlin openly while Trump supporters dismiss it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.